Welcome to the Cover 2, presented by Tigervision. This is episode 68. This is Grayson Mann. I'm Patrick Neal, as it says right here on the bottom. We're back from break. We're back from winter break. It was fun. It's really cold outside right now, but not as cold as where it's all snowing. Not as cold as Buffalo, New York this past weekend, but it's still a little cold for South Carolina. So, Grayson, I personally thought it was going to be a fantastic playoffs weekend, and there were still great points to point out. However, a lot of blowouts, a lot of underwhelming games, I think.
Yeah, the average margin of victory this weekend was 17.3 points. So you're looking at a 3-possession game on average this weekend, and some of those scores are kind of outliers.
Yeah, they were a little closer than the game felt.
Steelers scored late. The Cowboys, it was 27-0 at one point. Chiefs-Dolphins was never really close. I think the only true blowout that really stuck was the Texans, the Browns in the first game with the January Joe Flacco. And the Bucs
he's got a ring, though.
He does have a ring.
He's got a ring.
That was not a. I also want to point out to our audience. Do you still have your computer with a bunch of stickers on it, or are you?
No. So.
Oh, look at this! Look at that.
He's got a sticker count on me now. Yeah. Unfortunately, my camera stopped working, and when you're in college, you have to respond to lockdown browser sometimes to do tests, and when you don't have a camera that works, that's kind of an issue. So I had to end up getting my screen replaced. And that has led to them removing the stickers.
R.I.P.
I'm most sad about. I had a Joe Burrow one right here that I really enjoyed.
Not Joe.
Unfortunately, that one's gone. But anyways, you mentioned the Texans-Browns. Is that the game you want to start with?
Let's just dive into it chronologically. We'll go through all the greatest hits. We'll talk about some of the big takeaways from the game. Starting with C.J. Stroud.
Yeah,
and the Texans.
He was one of the studs this weekend for sure. I put down in the studs young QBs making their first playoff starts.
Yeah, C.J. Stroud, Jordan Love. I mean, how about the product that we're getting on the field with these QBs? The Texans were a mess last year. The Packers going through the Aaron Rodgers limbo, both now in the playoffs. I didn't necessarily expect the Packers one, but we'll get to that in a second. C.J. Stroud, man, against a Browns defense we thought could carry this team through a potential AFC playoff run, gets eviscerated in the first playoff game of the week.
Yeah, I mean, like, they had a good argument for being the best defense in the entire league. Myles Garrett will probably win Defensive Player of the Year. It's close. It could be him. It could be T.J. Watt. It could be Micah Parsons. But Micah Parsons also didn't do very much this weekend. Anyways, yeah, C.J. Stroud, man. Youngest QB to ever win a playoff game. Woo. Him and Jordan Love had almost the identical stat line, which was kind of cool.
They're doing
like
the Spider-Man pointing thing.
Yep, they did the 3 passing touchdowns, 200. I think Stroud had 272 yards.
Yeah.
One had 272, one had 274. Same completion to attempts ratio. Just fantastic. C.J. Stroud, man. Like, I mean, he's been good. I think he just locked up the Rookie of the Year award right there. Just because, I mean, he was making throws. He had where you'd have pressure in his face. He'd throw it, not be able to get his full release off. Kind of like have to stop short, and would still get the ball downfield to Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, whoever it was. But yeah, man, DeMeco Ryans has this team just doing fantastic things. They're way ahead of schedule.
So I want to get you a quote from a Texan safety. They had to test C.J. Stroud this week. I think this guy had this practice in the mirror before he went out and said this quote, but it says they heard that they tested C.J. Stroud to see if there were vegetables in his bloodstream, and they checked to see if the veggies were in his bloodstream, but all they found was ice.
Yeah. I think that was from the regular season, but regardless, the point still stands.
The point stands. I don't know if it was recently. It got sent to me right before we started filming. Shout out Catherine, but that was the funniest thing I've seen.
No, yeah, it's fantastic stuff. He does for sure have ice in his veins. Unfortunately, Joe Flacco's Cinderella run is probably over. He threw 2 bad interceptions on back-to-back drives at the start of the second half to kind of seal this game. But, I mean, you got to give it up for Joe Flacco. He while he had a decent amount of turnovers, wasn't afraid to sling the rock.
Yeah.
And
he had nothing to lose, really.
Yeah, he really had nothing to lose. I mean, he was on his couch just a few months ago, and now he's in a playoff game. the Browns, due to their financial commitment to Deshaun Watson, I don't think they're going to bring Joe Flacco back. I mean, maybe you keep him as like a third string QB, maybe second string, maybe you keep him as a backup. But Deshaun Watson is obviously going to be starting for the Browns going forward. But the Browns and Kevin Stefanski had a very, very good season given their circumstances. They had a ton of people on IR. Nick Chubb was out. Deshaun Watson, like I mentioned, was out. But what do you think? What do you think their spot is moving forward?
Like you said, they got a lot of money tied to Deshaun, and that there was potential conversations of what do you do if Flacco makes this big Super Bowl run, and he's 40 years old. This was probably going to be a one-year thing regardless, in my mind, no matter how successful they were. They're going to get Nick Chubb back, like you said. They should have a formula enough, and Deshaun should be, I don't know, he started, the thing was with Watson was before he got hurt, he did play the best game of his Cleveland Browns career against Baltimore and handed them a loss, a rare loss for this Baltimore Ravens team. And unfortunately, that was also while he was hurt too. So maybe there's some momentum that he can personally carry into what should be a gauntlet of a division next year with a Steelers team that made the playoffs, a Bengals team that's getting Joe Burrow back, the Browns obviously making the playoffs, and then the Ravens seemingly hitting their stride at the right time. We'll see how far they get next week. But I think you just got to run it back with Deshaun, and you have to, unfortunately, ride out this financial commitment because it's hefty.
And I don't know if you're going to – I don't know if Deshaun Watson is ever going to get back to the levels he was previously at with the Texans before everything that happened to him. But if you can get a level that's, comparable to how Joe Flacco played the last, however many weeks he started – you have something there with the Browns. You ride the run game. Hopefully Nick Chubb comes back healthy and is back to his old self, although he is getting a little bit older himself now. He's kind of getting to the age where running backs start to decline. But you ride this defense, you ride this run game, maybe get another weapon. Amari Cooper's getting older, but David Njoku is really, started to come on. Joe Flacco loved throwing to him. But yeah, Browns, I think, are in a pretty decent spot as long as Deshaun Watson is
top 16 level QB.
Yeah, top half of the league.
Yeah.
But we mentioned Jordan Love. Do we want to? We can talk about him a little bit as well.
Let's quickly do Chiefs Dolphins because there's not much I think to talk about other than I think you're probably one throwaway that even wasn't that great of a throw with Tua, severely underthrown to Tyreek Hill. This probably could potentially be 26-0.
Sure. Yeah, and I think there is a little bit of a discussion, though, just because, I think there's a serious discussion to be had on what Miami does in terms of a long-term Tua contract.
It's going to be tough because a lot of people it felt like the narrative was, what is this Dolphins team that's speedy, that it's a warm weather football team, what are they going to do when they go into a negative 30 wind chill? And it looked like they spoke it into existence almost. We knew exactly how this was going to play out. It was going to be a low-scoring affair. Kansas City's defense has been really dominant this year because they've had to be with the way the offense has struggled. Mahomes made just enough plays, and Tua, there were some throws that, there's those meme pages that circulate. They picked the one Tua throw that looks pretty ugly, but there was a lot of them. And I know the weather's tough, but I think in order for Tua to prove that he's one of these upper echelon games, he's got to win these more significant games, like the Buffalo game that would have given them, I believe, 2 home games in the AFC had they won, and then a couple games here or there down the stretch. I just think the Dolphins brass, if there's a potentially better option or a package maybe, you might want to consider maybe there's a conversation to be had about what to do with Tua.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, they I think the only team they beat that was playoff caliber was the Cowboys.
And we saw how that happened.
Yeah, and you saw how the Cowboys played this weekend. If you're the Dolphins, do you give Tua a long-term contract?
I think it depends on the asking price. I don't think you pay him. I mean, Daniel Jones got $40 million.
Do you pay him $40 million?
I don't know. And I think that the fact that you have to hesitate
it probably means no.
Probably means the Dolphins front office is having to hesitate too.
Yeah.
And I know McDaniel's he's a big Tua guy. He's had to really defend him for the last couple of years behind the podium. There's maybe an emotional connection there. But I've seen some names thrown around that, hey, Miami could potentially sacrifice a piece here or there to try to get into the top of the draft and see if they can get one of these skilled QBs. Maybe depending on what Dallas does, Dak Prescott's contract's up for negotiation. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's a quarterback around this league that they can try to pick off and say, hey, we just need to start fresh because we have all the pieces. They've got a great defense that was severely battered. They've got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle that makes nearly every QB I feel would be successful with those kind of weapons. I just don't think we've seen enough from Tua to really justify a long-term extension.
Yeah, like I think this game was a perfect example of how, Tua, while he's a very accurate quarterback, specifically in the middle of the field, he doesn't offer much in terms of play creation outside of, the structure play. His arm strength is not great by any means. And yeah, like the only place where he's, a very, very good QB is down the middle, throwing across the middle. And like, you talk about the Dolphins, potentially getting a new QB. Tyreek mentioned that like once his contract's done, he was planning to retire. I don't know if that's still the case or not. This defense is a little bit older. There are some pieces on there that are younger. You have Christian Wilkins, you have Jalen Phillips, who is coming back from an injury. Bradley Chubb is kind of in the prime of his career, but you have someone like Jalen Ramsey or Xavier Howard. They were very banged up, but if you're the Dolphins, you don't have unlimited time here. You have to decide this offseason whether to pick up Tua's fifth-year contract, and maybe you do that, but at a certain point, you're going to have to commit to Tua, and I don't know how much Tua's going to be comfortable with, going into a fifth year without a long-term contract. Then you're in a situation of, okay, we got to sign somebody in free agency or trade for someone, and it's just tough, man, because I just don't know if Tua, if Tua's looking in the mirror, is Tua a Super Bowl winning quarterback? I just don't see it.
And regardless of what Miami does, I don't think they're ever in a position to be truly the number one seed, because when it comes down to November, December, their offense becomes significantly, their advantage is speed, and in the cold, everything slows down, and it becomes about the real X's and O's, the timing of everything. Sometimes Tua doesn't have the arm strength that if it's a timing route, it's got to be there at a specific point. There's not any, like you said, creation outside the pocket where you go into a game where it's negative 30 wind chill or a blizzard, and I know Josh Allen's going to make plays somehow, some way with that. Look at the game where, this is 3 years ago almost, that big wind game that the Patriots and Bills played Monday Night Football. You look at Mac Jones, the Patriots aren't going to trust him with that arm strength to make throws in that wind. Allen was slinging it. I think he threw the ball 45 times. Mahomes can thrive in that situation. Lamar can create plays in that situation. I think unless we saw something from Tua in this game that we're not aware of, I just don't think I see anything really.
Yeah, I don't either. And I would be very wary about giving him a long-term deal because I think you could get stuck in kind of a QB purgatory where, you're a good regular season team, but it gets to the playoffs and kind of like the Cowboys, you can't win in the postseason. But
at least they have a dome too.
Yeah. Speaking of the Cowboys, though, we got to talk about them. We got to talk about the Packers.
Oh my goodness.
We mentioned Jordan Love. He was fantastic. Everybody's saying it, but I got to reiterate it. His throwing motion looks just like Rodgers's.
It looks like a mix of Favre, Rodgers-esque, and there was a throw that he made in the first quarter where I think he was avoiding pressure to his right, and he threw a off his back foot laser to Romeo Doubs, and they were up 7-0, and it was a pickup. I think it was on 3rd and long too. And I'm sitting there thinking, I think I turned to my dad or brother and went, I think Dallas is in trouble here. And Jordan Love, it felt like he had been in the playoffs for five seasons already, and this was his, all right, I'm going to have to take over now. And to go from the Packers in October where the GM was saying these last 10 games are an audition for Jordan Love to be worthy of consideration to now we're talking about him as if he's like the second coming for Green Bay. It's unreal.
The third coming.
Yeah, the third. I mean, how does, you got to give Matt LaFleur and that staff so much credit for being able to find ways for Love to be successful. You also have to give Jordan Love a ton of credit for really taking all the criticism in and just sticking to what has been right for him. He's balling out. It's awesome to watch.
And, I mean, this team is so young that they finally kind of hit their stride. They started the first few games, they started all right. Then they kind of had a real bad slump in the middle there, but that's just because everybody's a rookie, everybody's a second-year player. You know, you look at the receiving core, it's Dontavian Wicks, rookie, Christian Watson, second year, Dobbs, second year, Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, both rookies. You know, you have, I'm forgetting guys as well, you know, like Bo Melton and Heath and whoever else. Everybody is a first or second year player. And when you're that young, you're going to make rookie mistakes, second year mistakes. But after finally having enough time to play with each other, it starts to click. And this is what it looks like. You're beating the Cowboys, who are the 2 seed, at home. You're beating them in the playoffs. And now you're on to the next round. And like, yeah, the fact that the Packers may have hit on a third straight QB, it's almost like Space Jam when the Monstars suck the power out of all the NBA players. It's like Jordan Love has done that, or Rodgers did that with Favre, and now Jordan Love is doing that with Rodgers. And
he took those 2 years on the bench and just did like the more power thing, like Emperor Palpatine, and just started like force lightning all the power out of Aaron Rodgers.
You know, we talked about the Texans being ahead of schedule. The Packers, maybe not ahead of schedule, because I feel like if you're a Packers fan, you would have liked to have seen exactly this, Jordan Love leading a team to the playoffs. But I mean, beating a team like the Cowboys in the playoffs, pretty fantastic job by them.
And it wasn't fluky either. There wasn't like, oh, this couldn't be replicated. Now, San Francisco may be a different beast of its own, but
that's true.
There's enough of that you don't know what you don't know type thing with Green Bay where they have nothing to lose. So they're just going to go into next week and let Jordan Love rip it, which may be their best asset, is just playing that backyard football freestyle of play where they're just going to go out and let those young guys go to work and see what happens. And regardless if San Francisco puts them back down to earth or the Packers find a way to upset them, you got to be so happy as Packers brass, Packers fans, just at the future of this team where it's headed. Because you're not paying, like you said, they're not paying anybody for a while. So they could attract some free agents and try to bolster the weak spots of this team. So it's like the opposite of what I want my Patriots to do. They've been drafting so well, the Packers. It's finally caught up with them with the quarterback that they've selected. And New England is doing the opposite.
Yeah, and you just got to hope, you know, maybe in this offseason you do something with Joe Barry, because defense is probably what more so could let you down. I mean, the defense played all right against the Cowboys, especially, you know, as the game got later on, the Cowboys started to just score, but that was kind of because, you know, Sean Clifford, who isn't on defense, but he was playing, and like you started to ease up a little bit maybe, but
you know how bad it was for Dallas when Sean Clifford was taking snaps in a playoff game.
6 minutes left in the game.
That's blows my mind. Brutal. How we do this every single year with Dallas.
Yeah, but what do you do if you're Dallas at this point? I mean, I'll admit a hand up. I thought this year was going to be different. I thought they were going to win a game.
I'm putting my hands up too because I'm just as guilty. Just as guilty.
Do you fire McCarthy?
Here's the thing. I think this is more of a conversation we'll have with Philadelphia, because with the addition of Belichick into the coaching search, that's such an attractive candidate for a lot of teams that you bring in a guy like him and it's immediately, regardless of what's happened in New England, he's going to bring in structure. He's going to bring in a sense of success that we've seen before, yada, yada. Like, that wouldn't happen. That kind of defensive collapse wouldn't happen because Belichick successfully, against younger QBs, successfully, historically, been really, really good. But with Philly, and we'll talk about this in a bit, I saw Philadelphia quit from the first play of that game. And Dallas has won 12 games, 3 straight years, and just in the playoffs it hasn't worked out. I think it really depends on what Jerry Jones is thinking right now. And there's so many moving parts with Dallas. They got to eventually pay CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons. Dak Prescott's going to be due for another extension. Where's he willing to do in terms of a pay cut, just because he's made his money and he's going to continue to make money as long as he's wearing the star on his helmet just from endorsements alone? I think it's a tough decision because I don't think it was necessarily an offensive thing, but I wouldn't be shocked if they fired McCarthy if a guy like Jim Harbaugh or Bill Belichick was available.
Well, the thing is, it's 3 straight years now where you've had embarrassing playoff losses. Yeah. You know, you had the however many seconds Dak gets down, but they don't have enough time to have another snap. The Ezekiel Elliott playing center game last year, and now you have this. I just don't know. At a certain point, you can't just sit still and do nothing. You they added pieces this offseason, and they were a fantastic regular season team. Dak is probably going to finish top 3 in MVP voting, but you can't just sit there at a certain point and hope that things change. You have to be proactive about it.
What's the definition of insanity, though?
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. I love whenever people bring that out because I feel like everybody knows that definition.
Yeah. Well, the thing that you mentioned about how these 3 playoff games have been embarrassing, it feels like every time I sit down and watch a playoff game for the Cowboys, it's always the routine things, and this has always been a knock on McCarthy sometimes in his execution with time, but just like the routine simple things that everyone should be doing as a 2 seed in the playoff, like procedural penalties, substitution penalties, stuff from tackling, for example, stuff that you shouldn't be having to worry about. They always seem to come up for Dallas, and it just, like you said, I think if you look at that, this was especially last year, a couple of years you've been on the road, or you had the home wild card game, but you're gonna have to go to 2 games on the road. The path to the NFC Championship could not have been more open for Dallas this year, given how things went. You have Jordan Love, who, hindsight being everything, we know who he is, but you have a young quarterback. This is his first playoff game. Young team. It should be an easy win for Dallas for all intents and purposes against a defense in Joe Barry that couldn't stop a nosebleed if you asked him to.
No.
So
gave up 30 to the Panthers.
I think this is, as Jerry Jones says, this is the most disappointing loss of his career.
And I personally think you do anything possible to get Bill Belichick. But
I think another team might do so too.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Eagles. You mentioned them, and that's probably the team you were hinting at.
Yes. Let's go do both NFC teams, and then we'll do.
Well, we can quickly talk about, we got to talk about Lions, Rams as well, but we can do that quickly because that was the best game in all honesty.
Yeah.
But we're on sad NFC East teams right now, so let's go ahead and finish up the Eagles.
Yeah, Bucks, Eagles, Bucks 32, Eagles 9. I put down here, this was a career-defining, I know that a lot of the talk is about the Eagles' collapse, but this is, I think, a career-defining game for Baker Mayfield.
Congrats to him, man.
What a journey. I mean, being touted as the Browns' savior, they were still a mess for the majority of his early career, siphoning through head coaches like it's different pieces of candy. You get shipped off to the mess we know as Carolina, and that didn't work out. He was battling between Sam Darnold for the starting job. Then I think I put out something either on the podcast or a tweet and saying that LA audition that he had where he came in, just was about his business, had that wacky win on Thursday night. So there's something there if he can continue to find that success. Comes to Tampa Bay, nobody expects anything of him, and he goes out 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions on the year, and throws for over 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not even Tom Brady did that with the Bucs in the playoffs.
I mean, the Bucs always had kind of the roster to compete with anybody in the league just because, it's a team that, for the most part, a lot of guys were with Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl a few years ago. Mm-hmm. It just was going to depend on the quarterback. And Dave Canales, do you know who he was with last year to help revitalize a QB career?
Who was it? Because I saw
the Seahawks, baby. Geno Smith.
There you go.
So the fact that he's done this 2 years in a row where Baker's looked like a startable QB, and he did this last year and got Geno Smith a contract extension at age 33, I believe. It's just been impressive stuff. And yeah, the Bucs, like I mentioned, had the roster to compete with the Eagles, who, a little banged up, and at this point, their back seven was not good.
No.
And there's some serious issues there. Did not look as good as it did last year. Bradbury
was benched, I think, at some point in this game.
Bradbury was not good. The secondary, just in general, has not been great. Linebackers have been an issue for a while for them now. The Eagles started at 10-1. A little reminiscent of the Steelers a few years ago, back when they
2020 squad.
Yep, when everybody kind of knew they were a fraudulent team, maybe like the Vikings last year as well.
Do you know who the Steelers lost to in the playoffs that year as well?
It was, give me a second.
It's pretty ironic when you get the answer.
Yeah, was it Baker?
It was Baker and the Browns in that blowout game on the road.
Yep, that's right.
So something that we touched here on Mayfield, and we talked a couple minutes ago about how this kind of game, if let's say Tua had gone into Kansas City and won and put on a show and said, hey, he can make plays in the cold, like this is something we've never seen. That's the kind of game that you go, okay, we can give him a contract extension. He's done more than he's asked for. Baker, I think even if it's not Tampa, I think there are plenty of NFL teams that are looking at that game and looking at the energy and the humility and all that he brings to the table. I mean, if you're New England and you don't love any of the draft prospects, why not go throw a contract at him? Or Tampa Bay, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy just because of the history, maybe $30 million for 3 or 4 years. I could see it. I could see Baker getting a nice deal somewhere.
I could see him being kind of like a bridge level QB.
Yeah.
Where you bring in somebody maybe like Michael Penix or Jaden Daniels, where you sit a guy for a year, and then after that you have Baker for a year, and then you have those guys. But yeah, I enjoy it. Do you fire Nick Sirianni if you're the Eagles? I mean, we're having the same question that we did with the Cowboys.
I think Sirianni's more likely of the two candidates.
To stay or to leave? To get fired. Really?
I've never seen, and I've never really loved Sirianni. I always thought he was kind of childish on the sidelines, doing that little head nod at the camera, yelling at Chiefs fans, like cursing them out almost under the tunnel, and just doing certain things that I'm like, the coach needs to kind of be the figurehead of the. And I know Philly's more rowdy than most franchises, and Sirianni kind of almost like Dan Campbell's adapted the grit of Detroit, but you don't see Dan Campbell cursing at fans.
I'll say it works when you're winning, but when you're losing, it looks bad.
It's bad.
It looks really bad. So.
And the way that he's handled the transition from his two coordinators leaving, I know that's pretty tough. But at the same time, you start 10-1, and it's just been an utter collapse from here. The decision to get Matt Patricia, I mean, as a Patriots fan, I know how disastrous that can be.
Yeah.
I think if Belichick wanted the job, he's one of those guys that you could arguably go, yeah, we would over Sirianni.
Sure. Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like, the fact that Sirianni got him in a Super Bowl a year ago.
Yeah,
I think I'd be more willing to change up the coordinators as opposed to, give Sirianni one more year. McCarthy, I think on the other hand, should be gone.
Okay.
But that's just my personal thought.
Yeah. It just looked at the body language of that team. It's just always a bad look when you can tell that they've quit on a team or they've quit on a coach when the body language in a playoff game against a Bucs team that very well should be a winnable game and be like, hey, we can go on the road and then play a Detroit team that isn't fantastic defensively. We could keep up with that kind of team. It looked like they were dead on arrival almost. And Troy Aikman on the broadcast called it out and said, I've never seen body language like this for a winnable playoff game.
Yeah.
Like, are they down 40 or is it the first drive? I'm not sure.
There were, a whole bunch of musings about locker room issues, and maybe at a certain point, everybody's just kind of frustrated at each other. But, you have Jason Kelce gone now, so you got to find another replacement for him who's Hall of Fame caliber center. It's going to be tough, but do we want to? So we have 2 more games we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
I feel like we can quickly get through Bills Steelers.
Very quickly.
Basically
Josh Allen was great.
Yeah, Josh Allen was great. They have a ton of injuries, and the fact that they're going to have to play the Chiefs. While the Chiefs aren't as good as they normally are, it's still Mahomes, but they get to play him at home this time as opposed to in Arrowhead.
It's his first playoff game on the road in his career.
It is, which will be cool to see. But Bills' main thing, I think, is that they're missing a ton at linebacker. Mm-hmm. They're missing a ton in the secondary. So that's going to be the main thing.
Could be the equalizer against a struggling Chiefs wide
exactly.
receiver core.
The wide receivers kind of stink.
Yeah.
Really stink. Kelce has not been the same Kelce he has been in previous years. So, yeah, could make for an interesting game. Steelers, Mike Tomlin.
10-win season.
Good job. You got to figure out what you're doing with Kenny Pickett, though, is the main thing.
And I talked to a Steelers fan last night and asked him why wasn't Kenny Pickett playing, and he
didn't want to. He didn't want to back up Rudolph.
That was not an injury decision. That was a pure performance-based decision.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
But let's talk about the best game. We kind of saved the best game for last. We probably should have led with it, in all honesty. But Rams lose to the Lions. But it's more so the Lions won as opposed to the Rams lost. I think both teams played really well.
This was the best game and the best storyline-filled game.
Exactly.
You had the crossing paths of Stafford and Goff. Their careers are forever going to be intertwined just because of the nature of the trade. And this is one of those rare trades where I think both teams come away with it pretty satisfied and pretty happy. Especially you don't really see that much with QBs being traded. The Lions may not go win a Super Bowl like the Rams did, or that's still yet to be determined. Depending on how the playoffs fix out. But, I mean, what a game for Goff. It's been really a journey for him. Not as similar as Mayfield, but where he was cast aside to pretty much a sinking ship
Yeah.
and has been tasked along with reviving it, and that was kind of a full circle moment for him and Campbell. I mean, did it not make you so happy when you saw Lions fans tearing up in the stands after they're like, it's been so long? It's like, how can you not love sports?
Yeah, and Jared Goff gets to have a little subtle screw you to all his haters, to everybody that's like, Stafford's so much better. And objectively, Stafford is the better QB. He played better in this game. He was, sidearm after sidearm. Seemed like he had a new scrape on his hand, new cut on his hand after every single throw.
He might have died for a second there.
He might have, in all honesty. Probably should have been taken out of the game. But, look, Jared Goff gets a playoff win in Detroit. And all those picks that they got by trading Stafford coming to fruition. A lot of productive rookies, a lot of productive young guys on this team. And, yeah, the Lions are a real feel-good story. Their defense played really well, especially their run defense.
Oh, yeah.
Kyren Williams was pretty much shut down. But, when you look at this Rams team, I think they might have overachieved a little bit to what everybody thought. Nobody knew how Stafford was going to perform this year after his injury, coming off his injury. But you have a really young team built with a ton of players who are 5th, 6th, 7th round picks, undrafted guys that have really, really performed. Puka Nacua, at this point, I think is their wide receiver 1 because, Cooper Kupp has not had the same level season. He was injured, but, with a full offseason, maybe he gets back towards that level, but was not as productive this year as in years past. But Puka has been great. Kyren Williams, like I mentioned, has for the most part this season been great. A lot of guys on that defense have been great as well.
Yeah, they really, it was the running joke. I think we did this in the offseason was, can you name a Ram other than Stafford, Kupp, and Aaron Donald? And we sat there and we're like thinking for a minute, checking our notes, being like, I don't know. And now there's a lot of contributors. Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua.
Darian Kendrick, former Clemson Tiger.
Former Clemson Tiger, Darian Kendrick, the starting corner for the Los Angeles Rams. And so I think they got to run it back with the pieces that they have. They're going to have a first-round draft pick this year, and it won't be too high, too low. It'll be kind of in the middle of the pack there. So they get to start to rebuild with some premium talent in the draft. So I think the Rams could be a perennial contender in the NFC next year. As long as Stafford's healthy, they can go the distance.
Exactly. But yeah, looking forward to this weekend's games.
Let's do quick picks.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So first game that is being played is the Texans-Ravens.
This is going to be fun.
Personally, I would love a Texans-Packers Super Bowl. I think it'd be super fun. It's not going to happen,
No.
but if it did happen, wouldn't be mad.
Would not mind it.
Yeah, I think the Ravens win this game. Just Texans, good team, young team, but the Ravens are objectively a better team. Mike McDonald, one of the best defensive coordinators in the league.
I could see, and there were a couple throws that C.J. Stroud had against the Browns that probably should have been picked off. And I could see the Ravens, the better team than Cleveland, Lamar Jackson. And I know the narrative surrounding him is always that he's not a great playoff quarterback. But you bring Mark Andrews back, your security blanket. You have guys like Zay Flowers, OBJ. The receiving core around Lamar, the supporting cast is certainly a lot better than in years past when he's gone to the postseason. So I think Ravens win comfortably, maybe 30-20. Texans keep it close. Ravens do just enough.
There you go. Packers 49ers.
Ooh. Packers fans don't love that matchup from 2 years ago.
No, they do not. They do not. I'm going to lean 49ers. Again, just pick the favorite just because, again, 49ers are probably the most complete team in the league. Ravens are probably a close second, but this 49ers team is just, I think, a step above everybody else in the NFC. It's become clear after this past weekend. But again, similar situation where this Packers team, young, they're going to do great things, but I think for now, 49ers are going to win.
And we can't underestimate how significant it is that these two teams we just mentioned, Packers, Texans, they're riding with a hot quarterback. And maybe that's all the difference that is needed. But I think the 49ers, they're just too talented. I think Barry's defense probably comes back down to earth. They will not, unlike Prescott, I think Purdy, just because of his situation and the coaching around him, they'll put him in situations to succeed. He won't be turning over the ball as much. It won't be like the 4-interception disaster that cost me a fantasy championship on Christmas Day. So I'm going to take the 49ers in a comfortable win.
All right. What about the Buccaneers and the Lions?
I'm just going to keep riding it. I put this out at the beginning of the year. I'm a Baker Mayfield guy. I want to see the story continue to ride out. This is going to be my one upset of the weekend. I think Bucks go to the NFC Championship.
Okay. I like that. I'm going to pick the Lions just because.
I want to be different a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the Lions are just a complete team. They're playing at home again. It's going to be a ton of energy. Jared Goff is going to do just enough. I think it'll be close. The line is Detroit 6.5. I think it'll be closer than that. But the run game they have, the run defense they have, is going to do enough for them to win.
There we go.
Chiefs Bills last game.
Probably the best game.
It would be so funny if it went to overtime and the Bills lost, just like in a way that basically if the rule hadn't changed they would have won, but.
Like they score first, but still find a way to lose in overtime?
Exactly.
Oh, please.
I think I'm going to take the Chiefs just because betting against Patrick Mahomes is never the brightest idea. While their team is beat down and I think the Bills are playing a lot better right now, I don't know. It's just Patrick Mahomes. I'm picking Patrick Mahomes.
Taking the Bills. I'm going to take the hot hand of Josh Allen. This team's really figured it out. Joe Brady has done a great job of, I think, orchestrating a game plan that allows Josh Allen to be Josh Allen without all the crazy turnovers that we usually associate with Josh Allen. So for me, I'm going to take what I think is going to be actually the better team on the field on Sunday.
Yeah.
And the home team, too, Bills Mafia. I want to see more tables get dove into. That'd be fun.
There you go. That would be awesome. Yeah. That's going to be, I think, probably the closest game. But thank you for watching this episode of The Cover 2 presented by Tigervision. I want to thank Zach and Connor in the back for producing. As always, we want to thank Tigervision. Go ahead and like, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. Check out Tigervision, all the other shows we have on this channel. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Have a good one.